Have you ever wondered why democracy, a system that promises freedom, equality, and justice, so often disappoints? Why nations with democratic systems still struggle with corruption, poverty, chaos, and inefficiency? Why sometimes, in countries like India, democratic ideals are praised in speeches, but in practice, the system seems broken, gamed, or simply ineffective? Today, let's take a brutally honest look at why democracy without rules is dangerous, how self-interest, evolutionary psychology, and romantic ideals clash in a modern society, and why governance, real, grounded, and rule-based governance, is the only way democracy survives its own illusions. Let's begin by acknowledging a hard truth. Humans are not naturally selfless creatures. Evolution didn't shape us to act for the greater good. It shaped us to survive, to protect our kin, to compete for resources, and to seek status in our tribe. In fact, what we call self-interest is often just evolutionary instinct in a different outfit. We crave recognition, power, security, love, but mostly for ourselves and our own circle. Democracy, in its romantic form, assumes we will vote for what's best for society. But what if we mostly vote for what's best for us? Or worse, what feels emotionally satisfying, even if it's objectively harmful? History shows us this again and again. The fall of democracies into authoritarianism isn't always because of a dictator's ambition. It's often because people, driven by fear, anger, or perceived injustice, choose strongmen. They vote away their own freedoms out of desperation. Hitler rose to power in a democratic system. So did many others. It's not because democracy failed, but because the people in it were unprotected from their own psychological vulnerabilities. Now let's zoom in on modern times. In many developing democracies like India, democratic ideals are often presented in glowing terms: people's will, freedom of speech, public service, and equal opportunity. But in practice, what happens when democracy exists without a solid system of checks and balances? When corruption isn't punished? When institutions are weak? When politicians know they can buy votes, lie without consequence, or manipulate media narratives? You get a government that reflects not the best of society, but its worst instincts. Public service becomes a power game. Bureaucracy becomes a bribe economy. The public grows cynical. And democracy, the beautiful ideal, is slowly eroded from within. This is why governance matters. Democracy without good governance is like a powerful engine with no brakes. Governance means rules. It means accountability. It means consequences. It means transparency, justice, and competent administration. And it has to be boring sometimes. It's not about grand speeches or emotional appeals. It's about making sure the trains run on time, the schools are safe, the police are fair, and no one is above the law. Let's explore why democracy without governance is so vulnerable. First, let's talk psychology. The romantic view of human nature, the belief that we are innately good and rational, can be deeply misleading. Studies in behavioral economics show that humans are predictably irrational. We're prone to confirmation bias, tribalism, groupthink, and emotional decision-making. We follow the crowd, especially when afraid or uncertain. This is exactly why so many propaganda campaigns work. Hitler didn't brainwash a few people. He understood mass psychology. And once enough people go with it, the rest follow, out of fear of exclusion. Similarly, in a democracy with weak institutions, herd behavior becomes a powerful force. Social media today amplifies this to an unprecedented level. One viral video, one false narrative, and the entire country can be outraged, sometimes without facts, logic, or context. Emotion spreads faster than reason. This makes democracy incredibly vulnerable to manipulation. And if no regulatory body steps in, or if the regulators themselves are biased, the entire system turns into a performance, not governance. In India, for example, a democracy of 1.4 billion people, elections are held with massive public participation. But what happens after elections? Are public servants truly accountable? Are policies evaluated based on outcomes or just promises? Does the average citizen have access to justice without political or financial influence? These questions point to the crucial gap between the democratic ideal and the democratic reality. That gap is where governance must step in. Now, let's talk about another dangerous myth: the romanticization of freedom. The idea that if we just remove all restrictions, people will flourish. Just do what you feel. Speak your truth. No one can tell you what to do. These slogans sound liberating, but in real life, freedom without responsibility becomes chaos. A society cannot function if everyone only does what they want, without regard for others. True democracy is not the absence of rules. It's the creation of just, fair, and enforceable rules that allow freedom to thrive. It's the paradox of freedom. It can only exist within structure. Let's take a moment to compare with parenting. Imagine raising a child with no boundaries, no discipline, no rules, just love and freedom. That child may feel empowered, for a while. But eventually, the lack of structure causes confusion, anxiety, and poor decision-making. The same applies to societies. Love, freedom, and democracy without guidance, structure, and accountability lead to disorder. Let's look at some scientific data. A 2020 paper in Nature Human Behavior analyzed democratic backsliding across the world and found that weak institutions and unchecked executive power are the primary drivers. In countries where democratic processes existed, but institutional independence was compromised, like the judiciary or press, democracy slowly turned into authoritarianism. The authors concluded that rules matter more than rhetoric. Another study from Princeton University found that in the US, public policy outcomes correlate more with the preferences of wealthy elites than with those of average citizens, raising serious questions about how democratic the system really is. So, what's the takeaway? Democracy is not an end in itself. It is a method, a framework for choosing leaders and making collective decisions. But for that method to produce good outcomes, it must be embedded in a system of governance that checks power, protects minority rights, enforces rules fairly, and resists emotional manipulation. Otherwise, it's just mob rule in disguise. And here's the final twist. Evolution never designed humans to govern themselves in large societies. For most of human history, we lived in small tribes. We trusted people we could see, touch, and understand. Democracy at the scale of a nation is not natural. It's a miracle of design, law, and moral progress. It needs constant tending. It needs citizens who are educated, skeptical, morally grounded, and civically engaged. And it needs systems that are smarter than any one person or party. So the next time someone tells you democracy is the answer, ask them, democracy with what? With accountability? With data-driven policy? With independent courts? With honest journalism? With rule of law? If not, then democracy is just a feel-good label for something that could easily spiral into something much worse. In short, good government isn't the enemy of democracy. It's the only thing that keeps democracy from becoming its own worst enemy. In a world driven by tribal instincts, emotional politics, and romantic slogans, we must be wise enough to build systems that protect us from ourselves. That is the real work. And that's the only way democracy lives. Not in our dreams, but in the difficult, unglamorous business of governance.